Hi there, darkness, my old friend. Look, there's a fucking Ojama and a FLAMVELL among these. Let's just get this over with so I can move on with this chapter of my life. It also doesn't help much that the only archetype that got multiple cards worth of support instead of just one out of these was Malefic's, which made it a royal pain in the ass to pick out cards to use for the thumbnail. Also, just a heads up before we get into anything, this video won't contain the new BES monster, which is a thing for some reason, nor the new reptilian, because we're still not sure if that's the extent of the support they're getting in Rising Rampage, and I'd prefer to wait it out instead of potentially infecting 3 support reports with BES cards. Also, no cubics, because this video wasn't technically an archetype archive nor a Legacy of the Worthless, but the real reason is because I'm lazy. Seriously though, do you need somebody to tell you how to play cubics? It's just Crimson Nova and Crimson Nova accessories. Let's start off with a slap in the face that caught me the most off guard during the reveals in December, Neo FLAMVELL Lady, a level 4 pyro with 1600 attack and 200 defense with a quick effect that lets you discard one fire monster during either player's turn to banish a monster from the opponent's graveyard, and whenever a monster is banished from the opponent's graveyard you can send a fire monster with 200 or less defense from your deck to the graveyard, both of these being hard ones per turn. Well, or should I say FLAMVELL? No, I should not. It's as good as you can get with adapting the Neo FLAMVELL playstyle into the modern age, but the question remains why you would want to do that. The best thing I can say about this card is that it's an Armageddon Knight for the bizarre 200 defense fire monster gimmick that FLAMVELL's forced upon their attribute, and due to the way her two effects interact, she offers decent rekindling setup. You're more likely to have fun with this in the OCG due to rekindling being unlimited over there, and I can think of at least 4 Salamangreys that work well as targets, so there's at least one relevant deck you can splash this thing into, cause I can guarantee you're not topping with Lovals, Fire Kings, Hazy Flames, and certainly not FLAMVELLs anytime soon. I don't know, man, this is among the last archetypes I expected to get support at any point, let alone in 2018, so I can't help but approach it with a thin layer of cynicism. I guess you could say it's the best FLAMVELL monster? What an accomplishment. Next up is the new CLOUDIAN spell, CLOUDIAN AEROSOL. It lets you discard a CLOUDIAN monster, then put fog counters on a monster in the field equal to the discarded monster's level. You can banish this card and a CLOUDIAN monster from your graveyard to special summon a CLOUDIAN monster from your deck, but you can only use one of these effects per turn, and only once that turn. This is pretty neat, and honestly I fully expected them to get something like this eventually. It gives you a reason to run Eye of the Typhoon, not only because you can pack a CLOUDIAN with 8 counters, but also because of the graveyard effect that makes him easily summonable as a big beater, same with Nimbus Man. You can do some nasty removal or hand ripping depending on the monster you place counters on, and I'm pretty sure Turbulence turns into an extra link machine when it has 8 counters on it. It's a simple but effective piece of support, only hampered by the fact that this is all they got from the pack. I would have liked a couple more clouds, but I guess the sky cleared out too soon. Gimmick Puppet Chimera Doll gets a resounding ovation from me in the artwork department because this thing is fucked up 6 ways from the extra deck. It's a link 2 pointing bottom left and bottom right, requires 2 machines, and when it's link summoned you can either dump a Gimmick Puppet from your deck to the graveyard or add it to your hand. Then if you only control Gimmick Puppet monsters, you can special summon 1 Gimmick Puppet from your hand, but you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except for Machine Xyz monsters. Despite the supremely grotesque appearance, it's a pretty basic effect for a piece of support for a mediocre Zexal era Xyz spam archetype, but that's just fine. Gimmick Puppets were hardly in a position where they could afford unconventional additions to the arsenal, so easy access to searching, dumping, and swarming is perfectly welcome. Not sure how I feel about the lock into Xyz machine monsters. I mean, if they're going with that, I think they should have went all the way and let you search a rank up magic for the sake of giving a shortcut to the best the archetype has to offer. Regardless, if you're playing Gimmick Puppets, you really can't go without this one. Making their second appearance on Support Report, Madolche has come back with a new rank 4 Xyz, Madolche Teacher Glass Souffle, and she just looks like a really sweet old lady. That's all I got. I don't have the heart to make a Christmas cake joke here. She requires 2 level 4 Madolches, and during either player's turn you can detach a material to make a Madolche on the field unaffected by other monster effects that turn, and if a Madolche card is sent to your graveyard, you can shuffle 2 cards from your graveyard into the deck. As good as having some additional protection is, the effect isn't nearly as important as the fact that she's a free detach. She gives Madolches a fantastic first turn option, kickstarting your plays by setting up the graveyard, going into the rank 5 and moving on from there, all without wasting a normal summon if you use Petincessor. The effect itself might not be as ridiculous as Tiramisu's, but she's a way better combo enabler and stepping stone to big boards due to the simple detachability. Depending on going first or second, you could leave another copy of her on the field as protection, or go into another chocolate for the OTK. Frankly, I feel like they should have had a card like this from the start, but it would have probably made people hate/love the deck even more than now, comparatively. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Ojama Emperor.
I need help. If you can lift me from the throne, you will become the new Ojama Emperor.
But it's not good.
It's not a good idea, so if you want to leave me here. I respect that.
Link 3, 0 attack, points all down, requires 3 beasts of which at least one is an Ojama. Frankly, calling Ojamas beast is an insult to all animals, but I digress. If Ojama country is on the field, he gains 3000 attack and can't be destroyed by card effects. All battle damage you would take from this card is inflicted on your opponent, and as a hard once per turn you can special summon an Ojama monster from your graveyard, but you can only special summon fusion monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. For an archetype whose most recent showing involved an eldritch crossover between armed dragons and the XYZ fusions, it's pretty ballsy to release a card that plays it as safe as this one. Given the fusion monster limitation, you could technically still use it to support the XYZ Dragon Cannon playstyle, but the intention behind this hellspawn is very obviously to give some relevance to Ojama Knight and King for a complete field lockdown, which I guess plays well into the idea of Ojamas being the most annoying things in existence, so bonus points for staying true to the source material. The summoning condition is also pretty great, making Obedient Schooled an instant temporary, which they definitely had in mind. If anyone out there is still playing pure Ojamas with ground collapse, you're probably having a field day with this one, so who am I to judge?
Can I be in the video?
Now let's move on to the meatiest bunch of support we got recently. For an archetype I didn't expect to get any for a long time, the 5 new Malefic cards. As I tend to do with multiples on support report, I'll skip over reading the effects here. Their only new monster, strangely enough, is Malefic Paradox Gear. I say strangely because I genuinely expected a couple new dragons, but what do you do? This is a pretty good card, not only due to essentially being a normal summon into an instant big synchro, but because the graveyard banish effect makes it so that you don't have to run the bricky main deck counterparts of most Malefic dragons. This is an absolute 3-off due to making the deck's gears spin better, or at least start spinning in the first place. Malefic Selector has a bit of a harsh cost and condition, but due to the amount of new support it's not hard to set up, and it can lead to some pretty good comebacks. If they didn't want to give Malefics a simple and easy consistency boost, this is probably the next best thing. Malefic Territory is the archetypal training wheels, meaning it's specifically designed to fix the problems inherently built into the deck. It gives you a reason to run Malefic World, offers protection to your field spells, and removes the ridiculous safety locks from the Malefic monsters so that you can turn the deck into an OTK machine with the right hand. It also negates the best effect of Malefic True Dragon, but it's a sacrifice that had to be made. This one is really good. Malefic Divide is a perfectly good monster reborn, letting you increase the attack value on your board or go into extra deck monsters. The end phase banish tends to not mean much in the long run. Their only new trap, Malefic Tune, has a bit of a tricky activation condition since your Malefics don't tend to be destroyed by your opponent very often, at least not enough to run multiple copies, not to mention the graveyard effect is even more specific as a form of recovery. This is overall just a weird card to have in such an aggressive archetype, so if you want to run any, it's not recommended at more than one. Overall, this is fine. I fully expected the training wheels and improvements to recovery and consistency, but I could have done with some more dragons that have actual effects as opposed to being stuck with remnants of the 5Ds era. That aside, Malefics went from barely playable garbage to a tolerable but linear OTK deck, so I guess you can have some fun with them if you're a fan of the aesthetics. Speaking of dragons and nostalgia pandering, may I present Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. Requires 3 of the original Blue Eyes, cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects, and once per turn you can target 1 card your opponent controls, 3 if you use the Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon as one of the materials, and destroy them, but this card cannot attack that turn. Really mixed feelings on this one, but bordering on positive. The summoning condition is exactly what it should be, the protection is great, the removal effect is fine, and if you're dedicating a build to summoning this thing, it's usually not a problem to use alternative as one of the materials, but I'm not a fan of the attack prevention. At the very least, I think they should have made it so that the opponent takes half the damage on that turn if they really wanted to balance out the removal effect. Would I call it better or worse than Neo? They are different. Neo is more of an on-the-spot game ender, while alternative is more useful in the long run. In the end, both of these have no place outside of gimmicky fusion builds, so pick whichever one suits your preference. The other alternative dragon we got was the long-awaited Red Eyes Alternative Black Dragon. It cannot be normal summoned or set and must be special summoned by tributing a Red Eyes monster from your hand or field. It can only be special summoned once per turn this way, and if it's destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a level 7 or lower Red Eyes monster from your graveyard, and if it's the original vanilla monster, double its attack. I don't want to say Red Eyes continues to eat shit well off into the new year, mainly because this card is okay, but also because I dunked enough on Red Eyes players for a lifetime. Still, it doesn't change the fact that this card could have been a bit better. The summoning condition is the best thing about it. It's appropriate for an archetype which is more focused on graveyard management and can't search its main normal monster on a consistent basis, and it works in conjunction with some of the older Red Eyes cards, even Wyvern. But after being summoned, it effectively does nothing but act as extra deck material. You won't get a floating effect off nearly often enough for it to matter, so the built-in compensation for the tribute you use to summon the card is kind of half-assed. It would be cool cool to consistently burn people for 4800 damage with Infernal Fire Blast, but it really doesn't happen often. It's not even considered Red Eye's Black Dragon while it's on the field or in the graveyard, which feels like a downright petty design choice. In the end, it's not nearly as bad as it initially seemed to most people, and it's functional enough to be played at 2 or 3, but Red Eyes isn't that much improved with it. Guess Konami should have injected some more of that potential into it. Red Eyes Zombie Necro Dragon is a Red Eyes card only by name, moving on. The final card for today is the late piece of Kaiju support / anti-support, Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Thunder King Invert EXE Latest. During either player's main phase, you can discard it to banish one Kaiju monster you control that is owned by your opponent, then special summon one monster from your graveyard. You can only control one Kaiju monster. This card is unaffected by other Kaiju cards' effects, and it cannot be destroyed by battle with a Kaiju monster. During your end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it, but you can only use this effect once per duel. Unlike Mecha Dogoran, this guy distinctly lives up to the title Anti-Kaiju, and honestly should have existed during the initial run of the archetype. In case your big nasty boss monster you spent an entire turn making gets squished by a turtle, Mecha Thunder King immediately rectifies the state of your board and gives you a 2200 beater at the end of the turn. However, the thing is, it might as well not be a Kaiju monster. It doesn't have the inherent special summoning condition all the other Kaijus have, so unless you're playing against a Kaiju player, there's no simple and easy way to put this guy onto the field, although in better news for Kaiju players, Slumber is unlimited again, so you can nuke boards and spam turtles with no effort just like in the good old days of 2016. As for Mecha Thunder King, you can probably piss off a considerable amount of Crusadia players with it. And that was all for this support report. Check back in like 2 months when we revisit Reptilian, BES, and whichever other old bunch of cards Konami decides to caress with their grope of supportiveness. I hope it's Dark Scorpions. See you next time.